Good afternoon, everyone. We will go ahead and call our December Board of Elections and Registration Committee meeting of Cobb County to order at 3:02 p.m. We will be making a few slight modifications to the order of the agenda, so before we approve the agenda, we're going to move our board member comments up to item 4 such that it follows the approval of the minutes. That will then be followed by old business, then followed by new business. And the 3 items that are noted for new business will be taken in the following order: the director's election report, the approval of the 2023 board meeting schedule, and the final item in new business that we'll take up is the certification of the December 6, 2022 runoff election results. So with those modifications noted, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded to approve our agenda as amended verbally. All those in favor, if you'll denote as much. Any opposed? Nope. Motion carries. Thank you. The first item on the agenda for this afternoon is our public comment. My understanding is there are no participants that are commenting virtually. So we will take it up here in those that are here in the chambers with us. Do note, given the number of individuals that are speaking, 5 minutes is the maximum amount of time that each speaker will be allotted. Those of you that have attended on a consistent basis know that's generally the time that's allotted. Just wanted to make that known for those that may be with us for the first time. And it looks like Representative Ed Setzler is here. Senator Roulette.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to present today. I've made available to you an exhibit that each of you have on your desk, which is an opinion letter from the Office of Legislative Counsel. It's specifically regarding an issue that brings me here today, and it's in essence to keep the county out of court. There's an issue that I think is a very simple legal question, but that's been perhaps brought into question by some actions in the last month and a half by our county commission. It's in essence it relates to the reapportionment of county commission districts in the county. It's referenced in your letter, and I can provide any samples that the board needs beyond this. But in essence, last February, the General Assembly enacted House Bill 954, which was a reapportionment plan. Every 10 years, of course, there's a requirement based on the new decennial census to reapportion county commission districts. That was taken seriously and was enacted by the legislature, passed both the House and the Senate in February of 2022, this year, and signed into law by Governor Kemp on March 2nd of this year in Act 562. Enacting what would be the reapportionment districts for Cobb County, all 4 Cobb County Commission districts. When that was enacted in law, this board appropriately, following the law, used that as the basis for qualifying candidates last March. So the candidates that qualify for the commission districts qualified using that map. This board also rightly built ballots for those elections and for the primary, and then certified those elections after the May primary using those duly enacted maps, as this board should have. Likewise, this fall, coming into the general election, this board used those legally enacted maps for building the ballots coming to the general election. And then after the general election, or a couple weeks before the general election, the commission tried to interpose a new map set based on a purported home rule power, which I'll show you does not exist. And I think, again, this board wisely acting after that, after the November 8th election, certified the election using the maps that was enacted by the legislature and signed by the governor. What's been curious in this process is it's widely known in the legislature and really across local government that counties' home rule powers give them certain powers by the Constitution, by statute, but those powers do not include reapportionment of the county districts. The home rule powers of municipalities, cities are different. If the legislature does not act, cities are given that power specifically in law, but counties are not given that power. Now, there might have been some confusion at some level by some members of the public, but if they're listening today, there's a very clear difference between those county powers and the city powers. The reason I'm here today is because we've got a letter that I provided to the county commission on the 7th of October, a week before their first action in consideration of this question and 18 days before their final action on it. And I've made it available, Madam Chair, after our conversation last week, and appreciate your time. Madam Chair and I spoke last Thursday at some length about this, and I made it available by email to members of the Board of Election, that where Legislative Counsel exhaustively, in this 3-page legal opinion, walks through the provisions of the Constitution, saying, in essence, and I know we're limited on time, Madam Chair, but if it please the Chair just to refer to this, and I took the liberty to underline some of these for members today, but that there is no constitutional authority for counties to reapportion themselves. It further states, as a simple matter of law, that by statute, counties have to be given powers specifically to have those powers, and that as a matter of law, the state statute does not give county those powers. And it actually cites a court case, one is a federal court case that specifically refers to Cobb County, and it's available for reference. There are two here, Bodker v. Taylor, and then the Smith v. Cobb County Board of Elections and Registrations, both cases that make it very clear there is no authority for county commissions to interpose a map of their choosing for that which has been duly enacted by the legislature. So my request, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your indulgence to hear this, is just to settle this question. This board has wisely used the duly enacted maps for qualifying, building ballots, certifying a primary, building ballots for a general election, and certifying a general election. It would be my request for the Board of Elections to make it clear that beginning January 1st of 2023 and forward, that the duly enacted maps would be the maps used as is provided by law without change or limitation. And I would just ask the board to consider that today as a body.
Thank you we appreciate you. Thank you.
Any questions, Madam Chair?
I do not have any questions. Generally, we don't take questions during public comment. This is the opportunity for the public to present items to us. So I, again, appreciate your presence here and providing that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just in conclusion, my goal today is to avoid litigation. I do know there's some citizens that I'm speaking for some citizens who are trying, who are a little bit bashful about coming forward, but I'm trying to avoid there being any litigation. This should be a simple matter of law for the board, and I just want to make it available to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sam Henderson.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the board, and fellow citizens. I want to thank the board for its, I believe, judicious and continuing work to help provide opportunities to vote for every registered and eligible Cobb County voter. And having been at the meeting where there was perhaps some controversy around deciding weekend voting and even whether or not there would be Sunday voting. I hope the board is gratified, and I'm certainly appreciative as a citizen of Marietta to see how many citizens benefited from early voting opportunities, from weekend early voting opportunities, and even specifically from Sunday afternoon voting opportunities. I did not go on a Sunday afternoon. We did have a family member go, and she said that there was quite a line, and that the poll workers said that the lines had been steady and robust for the entire time that voting was open on Sunday afternoon. So thank you. I hope that in democracy, those of us that are concerned about democracy know and are all fighting together for every eligible voter, including those that have difficult schedules, having the opportunity to vote in these elections. I'll also thank the board for its diligent process and its transparency in this particular last election, 2 election cycles. I've had the chance to both be a ballot monitor, an observer, to witness some of the testing of machines at every point. I was met by volunteers and employees of the Board of Elections who were cooperative, friendly, diligent, hardworking, hearing about some of the people that have been spending 60 hours doing all the testing of all the voting machines so that they would be ready for the runoff and so forth. And so I want to thank the group for providing an orderly process and a transparent process. I just want to say that as I was a ballot monitor, I was in with some people who had only observed and been ballot monitors in Cobb and some in other places. And they were extremely complimentary about the orderliness and the organization and the transparency specifically of the Cobb Board of Elections work. So thank you very much on behalf of citizens of Marietta.
Well, thank you, Mr. Henderson, for your presence here today and your comments. Ms. Debbie Fisher?
Good afternoon, Board. I just want to kind of recap this whole election cycle. So I'm going to just go through some bullet points. During the primary, we had some irregularities that were most concerning. One was that 7 locations actually tabulated the election week 1. ENAP was down twice in the first week of voting. Ballots were not scanned at the precinct, yet left to be taken to tabulation on Election Day, which created quite the stir since we didn't have a duplication panel to duplicate them. There was no warning, and there was a problem with getting additional people at the last minute. During the general and the runoff, there were some common denominators. One, during the general, was the poll pad pilot, which I do deem to be successful. However, the last minute notice, the changes that we had to make with our poll watchers to train them on what to do, there was absolutely no notice. At the time, I believe, and there's some controversy whether my memory had failed, that would be the only time we used those until the Secretary of State rolled it out. That was not the case. The poll pad with the printer was used again in the runoff. Again, no notice. We threw out the general election and the runoff after many, many, many emails to everyone concerned, could not get daily numbers as required by law. There were a lot of untrained audit teams opening ballots in both. There were few, if any, floor supervisors overseeing the scanning and the opening of ballots. Most duties were left to one person that in the past 4 people did. There were 1,000 ballots, absentee ballots missed. In the runoff, 3,440. During the general, we had the library drop-off. Again, little to no notice. In my opinion, that was an exploitation of the law. We went days without opening ballots. We sent shifts home early. Again, no notice for those of us who monitor and work on duplication panels. The communication was poor throughout. During the general, we missed a memory card. I believe that also happened during the primary. I don't understand how that could be. If there was any kind of quality control, how a memory card is missed. During the runoff, we were prevented by this chair from observing the return of those memory cards, which is against the law. We are required to be able to observe every part of the election, including the computer room, which we were sequestered to a little area of about 2 by 3, even though there were 6 to 8 of us. During the runoff, we had to request multiple times to add additional shifts, knowing that the number of ballots that remained to be open were going to hit us on election night. Election night in the general, I left at 10 minutes till 4 a.m. The absentee ballots were not even uploaded until 4 a.m. Cobb County was the last reporting county out of 159 counties. During the runoff, there was a shocker. When we came in on Sunday, there were 663 ballots to be duplicated. That's unheard of. Then by the end of the day, there were 1,332 to be duplicated. I never got an updated number how many we actually did.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Ms. Susan Strevens.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Strevens, and I am here to give you notice of maladministration that continues and in the Senate runoff of December 6th. And my concern is I did an absentee ballot. My husband and I did an absentee ballot. And the absentee ballot, at the top, it said to remove the stub. But there were no visible perforations in which to detach it from the ballot. And so I called the office and requested to speak to Ms. Leveler twice. And the person told me I had to tell them what the issue was first. And so I told them, and she said to ignore the stub and just to fold the ballot. It wouldn't fit in the envelope with the pre-creases in it. I had to go and refold the ballot to get it to fit in that white envelope. So that's what we did. And there's this highlighted section on the ballot talking about not damaging the ballot, not to tear it, not to cut it, and not to damage it. So I didn't even know if folding it like that would damage it. And those were the questions I was trying to get answered. So I did write a text and explained all this, and then I did receive a response. Unfortunately, it came after we had already sealed the envelope. So I couldn't go back and re-examine it. I did take pictures, though. I took a picture of our ballot to show that it's totally smooth at the top and did not see any way that it could be, the stub could be removed. without damaging the ballot. So I'm here to request that with all this ongoing mail administration, that this election not be certified and that there be a hand count by some qualified people with security of every ballot to know what the true outcome of the election in this Senate runoff race is. And also that Jovan Hudson Pulitzer come in and do a forensic audit on that race. And that's the request that I have. It's really time for y'all to take some action, corrective action, so that we have secure elections, that we know that our vote counts. And I don't know if my vote counted. I don't know if it got through the machine. I don't know that process, but I do know that just the front end aspect of it was horrible. And there needs to be some corrective action taken, or y'all need to just resign, because you can't do the job. And we've had 3 cycles of this, on and on and on. So I come in the peace of Jesus Christ, and I ask that you take and really look at this and make some corrective actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strevens. Christine Rosman.
Hello, Christine Rosman here. I actually volunteered and was on the duplication panel. And I'm not going to say anything because I took an oath that I wouldn't discuss things, but just things that were discussed even on Nextdoor of saying about these ballots that were obviously, it was so poorly done that I'm wondering why there wasn't a dry run that was done, why the perforation, if you're saying, you know, tear at the perforation or cut at the perforation, because there were so many rejected ballots. And I don't think I'm saying anything out of line with the oath. I mean, anything that I'm saying is something that somebody that was at the window could observe too, was just the mass quantity of the runoff ballots that had on the, for the duplication panel of the ones that were for the runoff. So just to make sure I'm saying about the right election. I know that Cobb County, we print our own ballots, which is uncommon for most other counties. And I was stunned that there wasn't, I'm going to repeat myself just because it was so stunning, of how there wasn't a dry run of doing it. I mean, you go to a Chick-fil-A, they have a system, they have a process. This is like, Janine does a lovely job, but there's like, I don't know why it was like the first time this has ever happened. Again, France is a country, they can get their ballots done in one day. And we can't get we have like a month or so, 6 weeks of elections, and we can't figure it out. One of my biggest things too, and I think a lot of people, is that this mystery, and I know this isn't anything that can be done at the county level, but the whole mystery about the QR code, because nobody knows what the QR code says. QR code says, accept Dominion, and they're the only ones that can know what it says. So it's kind of hard when this little mystery elephant in the room of the QR code, nobody knows except, so it's, the trust factor isn't there. We don't trust the process. And this is a freaking embarrassment for our county, especially when the taxpayers spend tens of millions of dollars every year with not just this, for the Board of Commissioners. And if you guys couldn't figure it out and you didn't have like, wait, we're saying the perforated line, but there's no perforated line, why didn't you figure that out beforehand? Why this embarrassment? And I hope to God you're all embarrassed, because it was embarrassing. I have people from out of state calling me saying, what the hell happened to Cobb County? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosman. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the approval of our meeting minutes. So we have meeting minutes from 4 meetings. Our normally scheduled meeting took place on November the 15th, 2 special called meetings on November the 18th, November the 23rd, and then our meeting that was held on election night on December the 6th. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes? Does anyone have comments or questions or concerns with respect to the content of the meeting minutes? I also note that Ms. Brooks is on virtually. Am I correct, Cornelius? Okay. All right. Well, if there are no comments or concerns to be raised with respect to the meeting minutes, I'll entertain a motion to approve them, and I'll do so individually given the content specifically of the meeting minutes for November the 18th and the November 23rd special called meeting. So with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our November 15th meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve minutes for our November 15th meeting. All those in favor? Ms., is she unmuted?
She should be.
Ms.
I
Brooks?
responded, yes. My response was yes.
Thank you. The motion
For the-
passes unanimously. Moving on to November the 18th, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for our November 18th special called meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the meeting minutes for the November 18th special called meeting. All those in favor?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Moving on. November the 23rd, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for the special called meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the meeting minutes for the November 23rd meeting. All those in favor?
Yes.
And finally, the motion passes unanimously. And then finally, the meeting minutes for our December the 6th meeting held on election evening. I'll entertain a motion to approve those meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor?
Yes.
Mr. Bruning? Mr. Bruning, are you in favor?
Oh, thought I pushed it.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously. We are going to move into the next item on our agenda. As per the comments at the top of the meeting, we are going to move to board member comments at this time. So I'll open up the floor.
Well, I'd like to.
Your mic,
excuse
please.
me. Sorry.
Sure.
Am I on? Am I on? Okay. I think Mr. Sessler's or legislative, future senator, Representative Sessler's letter here. I think I didn't know all about all this that was happening, but I would like to make a motion here, move that the Cobb County Board of Election Officials officially adopt a legislative map enacted by the Georgia Legislature, HB 1154, and signed into law Act 562 by Governor Kemp on making March 2nd, the 2022 for official use and the district maps for Cobb County and the Board of Commissioners to be effective on January 1, 2023, and containing basically containing and the use without limitations for the remainder of until the next time we have redistricting, I guess, for this decade. And that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I think that probably the proper procedure would
I
be,
understand.
probably that's not a proper motion at this point. You probably need a motion to add it to the agenda. Since it's a substantive item, sometimes we can, like a procedural motion, like reordering the agenda, you can just make that motion. But if you're going to add an item to the agenda that wasn't advertised, such as this one, that's a substantive thing affecting an election, you gotta make a motion to add it to the agenda first, and then you can
Okay.
then you can make your motion.
Make a motion to add it to the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion.
Okay. Which is, yeah, where I was going to go with it. But it's perfectly fine. So then it will be added to the agenda at new business, and we'll take it up there, because it is new business. But it's been moved and, well, if it is added to the agenda, if the motion passes. So.
You said it, we'll stick with it.
I am but one person, one vote on this board.
Well, I'll vote with you, so that's
And I
good.
appreciate you, sir. So it's been moved and properly seconded to amend the agenda to add the board, we'll refer to this as the board commission map, in the new business area. All of those, go ahead.
Are we going to
Discuss? Yeah, absolutely.
I had asked, I'd asked Daniel if we could discuss this in executive session, because this is obviously a big legal question, which I don't feel confident in judging just based on what I've heard. And so I would propose that we have our executive session, hear the legal issues before we take action, because I wouldn't feel confident right now in voting yea or nay on this issue.
However, and duly noted, I have also spoken with Mr. White prior to my conversation with Senator-elect Setzler, as well as following my conversation with Senator-elect Setzler, and do believe that it is appropriate for us to have have a conversation during executive session about the matter. I will note, however, that presently what is on the floor is a motion to add the item to the agenda. And so I would, yes, that would be for this meeting, to add a fourth item under new business to the agenda. So it's been moved, properly seconded. I don't know whether there was any further discussion about adding the item to the agenda. Hearing none, it's been moved and properly seconded. So those that are in favor of adding the item to the agenda as a fourth item in a new business, all of those in favor? Jessica?
Yes.
Okay. So the motion passes. The item will be noted on the agenda for discussion. Noting that we were in the midst of board member comments, are there any additional board member comments? Yes, sir.
I would just like to comment on the issues with the ballots, absentee ballots, and perforations and folding, and just note that I had exactly the same problem. I couldn't find the perforation, I couldn't fold it properly. I finally ended up forcing it to be folded so I could get it into the envelope, and
unfortunately, the reason I knew how to do that was that it happened to me last year. So I am very much in favor of having a test run, and I would volunteer to be the tester this next time around, so we don't have this problem again. It is embarrassing, and it's an annoyance to those of us who use absentee voting. So.
I also have comments. I'll reserve mine till the end of the board member comment section. I don't know, Ms. Brooks, whether you have any comments, and I don't want to call you out. I just note that you're not to my right, as you generally are, so I can't look to you and see that. So if you have comments, let us know.
I think I'd like to make just a brief comment that this has been an exceptionally difficult cycle, but I would like to, because I observe, because I go to advanced voting locations, because I talk to many of our poll workers and most often attend poll worker training as well. I would like to thank our poll workers who really made the extra effort to respond to the request that we made of them, to our need to offer voting on that Saturday, as well as Sunday, because I know that this for the runoff in particular, that was during the holiday season, but just want to thank them sincerely.
Ms. Mossberg, do you have any comments? Okay. I do have comments, some of which will address some of the statements that have been made today in this forum, but more generally to note that and really echo the comments of Ms. Brooks, in as much that this has been a very challenging election cycle. It's been challenging on a number of fronts. Definitely for me as a board member and chair of this board, I am confident in saying that I believe the fellow board members have found it to be equally challenging. Suffice to say, there are a number of issues that occurred during the course of this election cycle that raise concerns. We've addressed those concerns in as a transparent a way as possible, in as much responding to emails, phone calls, being present in these very chambers, myself and Director Eveler, at the request of the Cobb Board of Commissioners to speak to them and to the public about the issues that have taken place. In addition to that, there have been other conversations, other meetings with respect to the number of issues that took place over the course of the election cycle. And what will take place, I believe this has been publicly stated in a number of different instances, but there will be a fulsome audit that takes place right down from our processes with regard to absentee ballots, how they're received, how information is communicated to us via this portal. All of the requests for absentee ballots don't come directly to us. Some of them are received by us through the Secretary of State's a portal that is managed by them. But do realize that we do take this seriously. I personally take it seriously in as much while I do have a full-time job. Thankfully, my job allowed me to step away from it for a number of days and periods of time where I was able to work in the office alongside our staff. And that's not to demonstrate any level of kudos that you need to give me, but it's more so my commitment to really understanding all of our processes, making certain those processes are documented such that they can then be audited, and that audit very well may take place by a third party. We have been in touch with Madam Chair Cupid with regard to utilizing Cobb County Audit Services. It's a part of the county to elicit their support and assistance and potentially a third party. So I encourage you all to continue to reach out to us. We may disagree with regard to how we move forward, but I think each one of you can agree that I am always receptive and available and responsive when you reach out. With that, if there are no further board comments, we'll move on to the next item in the agenda, and that being old business. Don't believe that there is any old business. Moving on to new business. Ms. Evler, your report.
Thank you. Let me just pass out these items to the board first. One of each. And Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind passing one, do we have an extra one to give to CP so you can put it up on the screen? Thank you. All right, so thank you very much. First item I'd like you to draw to your attention is the report from election night, December 6th, general election runoff report from election night. This is our usual report that we put together some information so we can see sort of trends over time. We did have the first precinct came in by 8 o'clock. That was Marietta 4B. And then the last precinct was in by 10:30, and that was Oregon 04. That was 2.5 hours, and it was a really smooth transition to get all of the poll managers' cars in and all of the stuff unloaded. So we were very pleased with the election night process and how our staff has used the new facility in better ways from the general elections so that we could really expedite that process. There were no items that were left at the polls. The absentee advanced voting was uploaded at 7:25 p.m. and we also uploaded one of the batches of the mail at 7:25. But we didn't get all of it uploaded until 1:30 in the morning. So the staff left, most of the staff left by 11:30. The managers were there until 3:41 a.m. to finish up some of the mail and uploading that. The turnout was at 54.41%, so pretty much what we expected to see. We are reporting here on our provisional ballots that were issued. We issued 565 absentee mail provisional ballots. And if you remember, these are the ones that there's mismatched information on the application. And so we send out an opportunity for that voter to cure that mismatch, and they receive a provisional ballot. Of those 565, 216 were cured and counted. There were 16 provisional ballots that were issued during advanced in-person, or AIP as we put here, and 12 of those were counted. And on election day at the polls, we issued 348 provisional ballots, of which 279 were counted. And then the bottom part of this report shows the numbers of issued by mail, the electronic delivery, that would be overseas and military, and then how many ballots were issued in person, and then there were some that had to be issued and cured later, so there's 204 that were cured after Election Day, and then the total number counted was 164, 198. Just to let the board know, also on the consent order ballots, the ones that we were allowed to receive up until December 9th, as long as they were voted by Election Day, there were 386 of those that were added to the tally.
Just to clarify, 386 that were postmarked December 6th, received by the 9th, that were included in the tally, correct?
Correct. Okay, and so the other page that you have is the election summary report. And this shows, again, the same numbers, but just in a little bit different way. This is from our tabulation computer. So this would be the official summary report that we would be asking you to certify. Just a couple of comments about some of the things that some of the public has brought up the item about the perforation on the paper. That paper was different than what was used in the general election because we needed a much shorter ballot for this one, for the runoff. So it was a very quick order to try and get to the shorter paper, which was 8.5 by 11 with a 1-inch stub. It did all have perforated stubs. All of the ballots did have perforated stubs. We do print our own ballots on our mobile ballot printer. And it wasn't clearly delineated that the stub was there or that where the stub would be. It was 1 inch down from the edge of the paper, and it was very finely cut. So, you know, every vendor that you buy perforated paper from may have a large needle or a small needle to make those perforated markings. And this one happened to be very fine and wasn't visibly very easy to distinguish. And so with people being very careful about not damaging their ballot, they were hesitant to make any kind of exploratory folding to see if they could find the perforation themselves. And so we did get a lot of calls, and sometimes we just told people, just fold the ballot, don't worry about the stub, fold the ballot any way you want, and fit it into the envelope. Some people made their own choices, and it was too large to fit into the envelope with the stub, and often that caused some damage to the ballot, which others have said required duplication. We did have a large number of ballots that required duplication due to this issue with the paper and the perforation. We have some definite ideas about how to fix that next time, including running a test, although when we ran that first batch of ballots, we knew there was a stub there, so it wasn't readily apparent to us that people would have issues with that. So it would be maybe bringing somebody in that wasn't as familiar with what we knew was already there. And having somebody, like maybe a board member say, yeah, this works for me, or we need to do something a little different. So there were quite a few ballots that needed to be duplicated, but the good news is that a ballot cannot be discounted because it's damaged. We will always duplicate any damaged ballot, and it will be counted. So I know people were hesitant to fold it differently or cut it off or try and fold the perforation, but they really should be comforted in knowing that we're never going to throw a ballot away because it doesn't go through the scanner. We're always going to duplicate it, and it will count.
Director Upler, may I ask just a couple of questions?
Of course.
The stub that you made reference to. No worries, I got you. Stub. What's the intent or the purpose of the stub?
So the machine that packs the ballots, it needs a QR code to identify what that ballot is, and so that's on the stub. So it's only used in the packing of the ballot and isn't necessary for any kind of record keeping, or, the voter doesn't need it. It's just because it has to have something to say, if this voter's on this list with, Bryant 01, that I get a Bryant 01 ballot, and it reads that a little very small QR code on the stub that just says it's a Bryant 01 ballot.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so that is the conclusion of my report. I'll entertain any other questions the board members have, but we are ready to certify if you are.
Does anyone have any further questions for Director Eveler?
I just have a quick question. Hi. On the provisionals, do we have any further breakout about which ones were from after 5 p.m. or what caused the provisional?
I know that is available, but I didn't bring that to the meeting.
Okay.
I can provide that to you later.
Okay, cool. That's it.
Okay.
Would they have it today?
Gentlemen?
You think, or? Okay.
Yes.
I they were, I just didn't know whether they.
Janine, just one comment.
Is or what they were doing.
As I read this, we had a total of 146,000
Sounds good.
advanced voting votes, advanced votes, versus the 279 total. So over half of the total votes were advanced voting, and that was in a very compressed period of time.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I probably was remiss in not challenging, or congratulating, I should say, my advanced voting team, because as was also discussed in the comments, we did do the pilot program through both the general election and the general runoff, which was always intended to be both of those elections. And it will be something, a process we will be using ongoing from now forward. It's no longer a pilot. It is something that the Secretary of State wants to roll out to the entire state. And it worked very, very well to move the lines along very quickly. On the last day of early voting, we were completely done before 7:30. People who had been in line at 7 o'clock, they're allowed to keep going and to continue voting. And I got a text from the Secretary of State's office about 9:30 that night saying, "How are your lines?" And I said, "Well, we've been done since 7:20." And other counties were still working through that line of people who had been waiting since 7 o'clock. And they had no idea that we would be completely done. So it was a fantastic process. And the team that we have working the early voting, as was said by Ms. Brooks, they stepped up to the extra weekend voting, kind of last minute changes of adding Saturday, and people volunteered and they worked a long day, and we were really, really proud of how that went.
And I'm glad, Director Eveler, that you made mention of the poll pad pilot. Can you, just for the edification of everyone that's here with us today, briefly tell us about the poll pad pilot and how it came to be? Because I do believe that that's something that came from the Secretary of State, am I correct?
Yes, it is. They wanted to try it out in several counties. It consists of cellular connected poll pads. So there's no longer a need to enter the voter's information directly into the state registration system, because it is connected to all the other poll pads in the state and then connected to a copy of the voter registration database. It doesn't go directly into the database for access. And then, so that eliminated having to enter the information in a laptop and then create the card on the poll pad. So that's one device that's eliminated. And then it also is connected to a printer, and so whatever is signed by the voter on the screen is printed out on the attached printer. And so that eliminated the need to have the voter fill out an extra form ahead of time. Excuse me. Excuse me. And so those two innovations really cut down on the chance of error, the security of the whole system, because the actual registration system is not being accessed, and the quickness of moving through the lines. It was a great program.
And the Secretary of State selected Cobb County to participate in the pilot?
We were part of a working group of several counties that worked with the state to talk about technological enhancements that are needed in areas that need improvement. And so that working group was part of the team that was offered up the pilot. And we talked about whether we wanted to do a pilot, because there are some risks in that. Excuse me. And we decided that it looked like it was going to be a good program. So we went ahead and did it. We were the largest county that was involved in it. There were 18 counties altogether.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions. So having received Director Eveler's report, specifically the numbers with regard to the results of the general election runoff, the runoff for the general election race that was held on December the 6th, I will entertain a motion to certify the results.
Make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Gartland. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the, certify the election results from December the 6th. All those in favor?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. The Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the next item under new business, the approval of the 2023 board meeting schedule. It's on tab 4C, the last item in your packet of board members. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I know we had the opportunity to preview this, and thank you, Director Evler, for sharing this with us prior to the meeting. But unless anyone has any questions or concerns about the times, dates, or for that matter, location, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Thank you, Mr. Gartland.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the proposed meeting schedule of this board for 2023. All of those in favor?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. The motion passes unanimously. So now we'll go to the item that was placed on the agenda per motion. To start, I just want to be certain that we're going about this in the appropriate manner. Mr. White?
Yes.
So the item has been placed on the agenda. However, as previously noted, we propose to have a conversation about this during the executive session, given the nature of the item with regard to potential litigation. What is your suggestion here with respect to how we take this up?
So I do think this is a matter because we've had communications that indicate litigation could, and it's very probable regarding this matter. So it's something that can be discussed as potential litigation in executive session. What I would suggest is because there may be other items that need to be discussed, I have at least one other pending litigation update that needs to be discussed. I would recommend that, you just see whether there's any other items. Doesn't look like there's any other substantive items on the agenda, but if there's anything else that needs to be brought up, and then if not, we can adjourn to we can have a motion for executive session to consider pending and potential litigation, and then come back in and make any official action after the executive session.
With respect to that item? After executive session?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your suggestion there. So to that end, I also believe it appropriate for us to move into executive session. So we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thanks. It's been moved and properly seconded to move into executive session for the purposes of discussing matters that relate to potential litigation. All of those in favor?
Yes.
Okay. We'll note, just for the record, that Mr. Gartland voted no to move into executive session, but the motion passes. So at this time, those of you that are here with us, we will ask that you leave the chambers so that we can move into executive session for purposes of this discussion. And we will attempt to conclude the discussion as promptly as possible, but obviously we need to take this matter up, as well as it sounds like another matter, litigation matter. And we will let you know when it's appropriate for you to return. I will entertain a motion to conclude the executive session. Thank you, Mr. Gartland. A second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to conclude the executive session. All those in favor? Motion is unanimous. Okay. All right. Mr. Gartland, you requested to have this item on the agenda.
And again, I would like to make a motion.
Your mic, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I would. I'd like to make a motion again to move that the Cobb Board of Elections adapt the legislature's map enacted by the Georgia legislature in HB 1154 and signed into the act by Governor Kemp, Act 562, March 2nd, 2022, for official use, the district maps for the Cobb County Board of Commissions to be effective on January 1, 2023, and continue to use without limitations the maps that the legislature has approved and the remainder of the decade as required by law.
Is there a second?
You guys are no fun.
The motion fails for want of a second. Is there another motion that anyone would like to propose with regard to this agenda item?
I'd like to move that we request our council to file a motion in Superior Court requesting a declaratory judgment with regard to the disparity between the county commission adopted position or ordinance and the legislature's adopted maps.
I'd like to second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to direct counsel for the board to seek a declaratory judgment with regard to this open issue. All those in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay. Let the record reflect that Mr. Gartland is opposed to the motion. However, the motion carries for a count of 4-1. Thank you.
I wanted to support yours, but
There.
you support mine.
I know.
Y'all are funny. So moving on to the final item on the agenda, it's just the announcement that our next scheduled meeting will take place on January the 9th here at 3 p.m. In these chambers. And if there's nothing further, we will adjourn the meeting right at 5 p.m. Thank you. Did you all get the